She was closing the library when two vampire kings said, "We've been searching for you for centuries." Elara dusted off the final row of ancient tomes, her fingers tracing the worn spines as if they held whispers of the past. The library was quiet, the kind of quiet that seemed alive, listening to every step, every sigh. Moonlight spilled through the shattered stained glass windows, painting the walls with fractured colors. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the secrets lurking just beyond the streets. It had been another long night, like so many before. Elara had always loved the stillness of the library at night, the way the world seemed to pause. But tonight, something felt different. A chill brushed her neck, and she shivered, though the air inside was warm. She shook her head, blaming the old drafts that always snuck through the cracks in the windows. She walked toward the main doors, her hand resting on the cold brass handle. The library had been her home for years, a sanctuary of knowledge, a place where she felt safe. Or at least she had thought so. Before she could turn the key in the lock, a shadow moved at the edge of the moonlight. She froze, heart hammering. "Who's there?" she called, trying to keep her voice steady. No answer. Only the faint rustle of the wind through broken glass. Then the shadow shifted again, and two figures stepped into the light. They were unlike anything Elara had ever seen. Tall and possibly graceful, their presence alone commanding the room. Their eyes glimmered in the moonlight, crimson and gold, and their clothing shimmered as though woven from darkness itself. "We've been searching for you for centuries," one of them said, his voice smooth and low like velvet sliding over steel. Elara's breath caught. Her instincts screamed to run, but her legs refused to obey. There was something magnetic about them, something that made fear and fascination blend into a dizzying swirl. The taller of the two stepped forward. His movements were fluid, precise, and every step seemed to echo in the library as if the walls themselves were listening. "Do not be afraid, child," he said. "We mean you no harm. Not yet." Elara swallowed hard. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The second figure inclined his head slightly, his eyes softening in contrast to the sharp intensity of the first. "We are kings," he said simply. "Kings bound by time, by blood, and by a curse. And you, Elara, are the one who can end it." Elara blinked! The word curse made her heart skip. Her life had been ordinary, quiet, filled with books and the company of long-forgotten words. She was a scholar, not a hero. Not someone involved in kings or curses or anything so extraordinary. "I think you've made a mistake," she said, trying to sound firm, but the quiver in her voice betrayed her. The first king, Kale, smiled, not a friendly smile, but one that seemed to pierce through her defenses. "No mistake, child. Every century we search for the one who can unlock the library's secrets. You are that one. The threads of fate have led us here." Elara shook her head, taking a cautious step back.
I don't understand.
I work here. I read books. That's all." The second King Dorian stepped closer, his gaze intense but gentler than Kale's. "You have read, yes," he said, "but you have also dreamed. Every night you hear the whispers of the library, even if you do not understand them. You have felt the pulse of its power." Elara's pulse quickened. She had dreamed of strange places, of shadowed figures watching her from the corners of her mind, of voices calling her name in languages she had never learned. She had always thought they were mere fantasies, figments of an overactive imagination fueled by too many books. But now, seeing these kings, seeing the way the air seemed to bend around them, she wondered if the dreams had been warnings. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why now?" Kale's eyes softened for a moment, though there was still a steel edge to his gaze. "Because the library awakens," he said, "and with its awakening, the curse stirs. Only you can guide its power. Only you can choose its path." Elara's head spun. A curse? Awakening? Power? These were words from fairy tales, not her quiet life among shelves of old books. And yet, standing here, facing these men who had emerged from shadow as if the night itself obeyed them, she felt the weight of something far greater than herself pressing down. The library groaned softly, a sound like stone shifting. A faint glow rose from the floor, tracing patterns around the two kings. Alara took an instinctive step back. "You see?" Dorian said, his voice urgent now. "The library recognizes you. It has waited for centuries for your presence." Her fingers gripped the edge of a nearby table, trying to steady herself. She wanted to run, to hide, to lock herself in the stacks and pretend none of this was real. But a strange pull, something deep and unknowable, kept her rooted in place. Kale's gaze lingered on her, intense and unwavering. "Do you understand what this means, Alara? With your hand, the curse can be broken, or it can be unleashed. And should it fall into the wrong hands," his voice trailed off, but the threat hung heavy in the air. Alara shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't know how. I don't know anything about curses or kings or magic. I'm just me." Dorian stepped closer, his hand extended, not touching but inviting. "You are enough," he said softly. "You always have been. That is why we have searched for you, because only you can see what others cannot. Only you can decide the fate of centuries." For a moment the world seemed to pause. The shadows danced along the walls, the moonlight flickered, and Alara felt the library's pulse beneath her feet. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and wonder, dread and anticipation. I need time," she whispered, though even she knew it was a flimsy excuse. Time was not hers to command tonight. Kale's smile returned, sharp and unreadable. "Time is a luxury none of us have. The curse has been stirring, and with it forces beyond our control awaken. You have already begun the journey, whether you know it or not." Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. She had always thought of the library as a place of safety, a place of solitude. But tonight, it was alive, thrumming with a power that made her heart ache and her mind race. Why me?" she asked again, though this time her voice held a hint of awe. Dorian's eyes softened. "Because you are the bridge between worlds, because you are the key, and because we cannot do this without you." Alara's gaze flicked between them, fear mingling with an impossible curiosity. She wanted to say no. She wanted to turn and run into the empty streets, back to a life of normalcy. But deep inside, something called to her, a spark she had never felt before. Something that whispered that she had been waiting for this moment without knowing it. Then, as if answering that spark, the library itself reacted. The ground beneath her trembled and the faint glow intensified, tracing intricate patterns around the two kings. Books lifted slightly from their shelves, pages fluttering as though caught in a silent wind. A soft melodic hum filled the air, vibrating through her chest. Alara's eyes widened. What is happening?" Kale's voice was calm, authoritative. "It is the awakening. The library recognizes you as its guardian, its guide. You are no longer merely a reader of its words. You are a part of its story." The words sent a thrill of fear and excitement through her. She had always loved stories, always longed to be part of something greater, but she had never imagined it would be like this. Dorian stepped closer, his hand brushing a lock of hair from her face, careful not to touch, yet the contact made her heart skip. "We are not here to hurt you," he said softly. "We are here to protect you, to guide you, to help you understand your place in what is to come. But the choice is always yours." Alara swallowed, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on her shoulders. She was ordinary, and yet tonight, she was the center of something extraordinary. Her mind raced, filled with questions she could not answer, fears she could not name, and a strange growing fascination for the men before her. The moonlight shifted, and the glow from the floor coalesced into a shape, rising slowly like smoke from a fire. Shadows twisted and writhed, forming patterns she could not comprehend. And then, as if acknowledging her presence, the shadows parted, revealing an ancient symbol on the floor. A sigil she had never seen but somehow understood in her bones. "You've awakened it," Keo said, his voice almost a whisper now. "And with it, the story begins. There is no turning back." Alara's breath caught. The library seemed to hold its breath along with her. The glow of the sigil pulsed, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She did not know what lay ahead, or how she would survive what was coming. But for the first time she knew one thing with certainty. Her life, her quiet, ordinary life, was gone. And somewhere deep in her chest a spark of anticipation ignited. The library trembled. The shadows rose higher, curling around the kings and herself. And as the ancient symbol flared with light, a whisper echoed through the marble halls, a voice older than time itself. "She is the key, and the danger." Elara's fingers tightened on the edge of the table, her pulse racing. Fear, awe, and something unnameable surged through her. The two kings looked at her, eyes glowing, centuries of longing and power and hope shining in their gaze, and in that moment she realized that the adventure had already begun, whether she was ready or not. Elara felt the library's shadows dissolve around her as Kale and Dorian guided her through the streets of the sleeping city. The moon hung low, spilling silver across cobblestones slick with the night's mist. Each step felt surreal, as if she were walking through a dream she had only glimpsed in the corner of her mind. The two kings moved with an elegance that made her feel small and ordinary. Yet in their presence she could not deny the pull, the strange gravity that seemed to draw her toward them, even as every instinct screamed caution. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely rising above the soft echo of her own footsteps. "To a place where you will understand," Dorian replied, his tone calm, almost soothing, but carrying an undercurrent of something deeper, an urgency she could not ignore. Elara followed, glancing at Kale. He was silent, his gaze scanning the shadows, alert as a predator yet strangely protective. She felt both drawn to him and wary of his intensity. It was impossible to know where fear ended and fascination began. The city gave way to a forest, ancient and tangled, shrouded in mist that clung to the earth like a living thing. Trees rose like black towers, their branches twisting together to form a cathedral of shadows above. The air smelled of wet earth and old magic. Elara shivered, part fear, part excitement. "This way," Kale said, stepping onto a narrow path that seemed to have no beginning or end. As they walked, the forest seemed to bend, guiding them deeper into its heart. Shadows shifted at the edge of her vision, and whispers, soft and musical, brushed against her mind. "What is this place?" she asked. "The domain of the past," Kale said. "Our ancestral home. Here, time moves differently. Here, the curse's power lingers, waiting to be understood and broken." Dorian glanced at her, his expression softer than Kale's.
"You have a connection to this place, Elara, though you do not yet know it. Your dreams were the first hint."
The library was only the beginning. Elara's chest tightened. The weight of centuries pressed on her, though she had done nothing to deserve it. She was a scholar, not a hero, yet somehow her life had been entwined with beings far older, far more powerful than she could imagine. Finally the trees parted, revealing a castle carved from stone as dark as midnight. Towers spiraled into the sky, and the windows glimmered with an inner light that made the structure seem alive. Shadows moved along its walls, as if the building itself were breathing. "This is incredible," Elara whispered, unable to tear her eyes away. Kale inclined his head. "It is more than that. It is our home, our prison, and our legacy. And soon it will be yours to understand." Dorian extended his hand, a silent invitation. "Come. There is much you must see, and much you must learn." The doors of the castle swung open before they reached them, revealing a hall lit by flickering torches. The air was cool and smelled faintly of old parchment and earth. Portraits of men and women long gone lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her as she stepped inside. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. The eyes were not hostile, but they were aware, observing, judging. She had the sudden, strange sensation that these ancestors knew her, knew the role she was destined to play.
"You are safe here," Dorian said, reading her hesitation, "but the castle will test you."
It holds memories, and it remembers those who have walked its halls before you. Kale's gaze swept over her, sharp and unwavering. And it will not forgive weakness. The weight of their words settled in her chest. She had always believed herself strong, resourceful, but in the presence of beings who had lived for centuries, beings who moved with the confidence of those untouched by time, she felt fragile, like a single candle against a storm. They led her to a chamber filled with books, maps, and artifacts that seemed older than the city itself. On a pedestal at the center of the room lay an object wrapped in black velvet, pulsing faintly with an inner light. "The artifact," Kale said, his voice low. "It holds the power of the curse and the key to its undoing. But it cannot be used by us. Only you can awaken it. Only you can choose its path." Elara stepped closer, her fingers trembling. She had never felt anything like this, an object alive with energy, almost breathing under her touch. Her heart raced, but she knew instinctively that Kale and Dorian were not wrong. Somehow, she belonged here, in this moment, as impossible as it seemed. "Why me?" she asked again, the question spilling from her lips despite everything. "Why am I the one?" Dorian's eyes softened. "Because the blood of your ancestors carries the key. The library drew you first, but the castle called you second. You are the bridge between what has been and what can be." Kale's gaze did not soften. "Because we have waited for centuries to find someone like you. Someone strong, intelligent, courageous. And now that you are here, we cannot fail." Elara swallowed hard. Her mind spun with the weight of their words, the pulse of the artifact beneath her fingertips, and the strange growing connection she felt with both men. She did not know whether to fear it or embrace it, but she could not deny the thrill that ran through her veins. Over the next hours, they showed her the castle's secrets. Hidden corridors that bent space, libraries within libraries, chambers that held memories of the past like living portraits. Elara felt as if she had stepped into a story she had read but never imagined could be real. Through it all, the tension between the two kings never eased. Kale's intensity was a constant shadow, a challenge to her courage. Dorian's gentleness was a balm, but also a reminder of her responsibility. She felt caught between them, drawn to both, yet unsure how to navigate the feelings that stirred within her. As night deepened, they brought her to a balcony overlooking a courtyard where statues of winged creatures stood frozen in time. The moonlight made them glow, casting long shadows that danced across the marble floor. "You must understand something," Kale said, his voice carrying over the still night air. "This castle, this curse, our lives, they are all tied to yours now. Every choice you make affects centuries of history." Elara's heart pounded. I don't know if I can do it," she admitted. "I'm just a scholar. I read about magic and curses. I don't have the power to." Dorian placed a hand over hers, light as a whisper but grounding her. "You already have the power, Elara." "The question is whether you will trust it, whether you will trust yourself." For a moment the wind stirred, carrying with it a scent she could not name. A whisper of the past, of voices long silent, brushed against her ears. She felt the weight of centuries on her shoulders, the burden of knowledge, and the pull of destiny. I want to help," she said finally, her voice stronger than she expected. "But I don't know where to start." Kale's eyes gleamed. "You start by understanding the curse, understanding why it exists, why it has lasted so long, and why it calls to you. Only then can you wield the power without being consumed by it." Dorian nodded. "And you will not be alone. We are here, as guides, as protectors, and perhaps more, if you allow it. But the choice as always, is yours." Elara's mind swirled. She felt fear, awe, and a strange, unnameable longing. She was standing on the edge of a world she had only glimpsed in dreams, a world of kings and curses, of shadows and light. And for the first time she felt that she was not merely a reader of stories, she was part of one. As the night deepened, Cale and Dorian brought her to a chamber where the walls were covered with mirrors. Each mirror reflected not only her image, but fragments of visions. Scenes from the past, shadows of the curse, fleeting glimpses of events she could not yet understand. "You will see much here," Cale said. "And what you see will test you, but it is necessary. The curse does not yield easily." Elara stepped forward, drawn to a mirror that pulsed with light. As she reached out, a cold wind swept through the chamber, and the reflection shifted. She saw herself standing among the kings, but also alone, surrounded by shadows, a faint glow emanating from her chest. Dorian's voice broke the silence. "It is your choice how you face it. Courage is not the absence of fear, Elara. It is acting despite it." Elara's fingers hovered over the glass. The pulse of the artifact, the weight of the castle, the presence of the two kings, all of it pressed against her like a tidal wave. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, and whispered, I will try." The mirrors shimmered, and the shadows around them seemed to bow slightly, acknowledging her decision. Cale and Dorian exchanged a glance, one of respect and perhaps something deeper, a recognition that their centuries-long search was finally beginning to bear fruit. Then, as if in response, a distant sound echoed through the castle, soft, musical, but full of warning. Elara's eyes widened. "What was that?" Cale's jaw tightened. "The curse. It knows you have begun, and it does not forgive mistakes." Dorian stepped closer, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You are ready, Elara. But the path ahead is dangerous, and the choice you make next will bind us all, for better or worse."
Elara looked between them, fear and fascination battling inside her. The weight of centuries pressed on her shoulders, but beneath it, a spark of determination flared.
She did not know what lay ahead, or how she would survive what was coming. But one thing was clear. She had crossed the threshold, and there was no turning back. The castle seemed to hold its breath, the moonlight shifting as shadows swirled along the walls. And in the silence the whispers of the past echoed once more. She is the bridge, and the power, and the choice. Elara's hand rested on the mirror, her reflection shimmering with the pulse of magic. Fear, awe, and longing coursed through her, mingling with the pull of the two kings. She knew the journey had only begun, and that the bonds of blood and shadow would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. The castle had grown quieter, yet the shadows seemed to hum with a restless energy, curling along the walls as if alive. Elara walked through its endless halls, with Cale and Dorian at her sides, her mind spinning with questions she did not dare ask. The artifact pulsed faintly in her satchel, a steady heartbeat of power that made her feel both powerful and terrified. Cale's steps were precise, almost predatory, each movement commanding the air around him. Dorian, in contrast, moved with a gentleness that made her chest ache with something she could not name. Their presence was a constant push and pull, fear and fascination, caution and trust, dominance and protection. They arrived at the library's inner vault, a chamber she had not seen before. The walls were lined with shelves carved into the stone itself, filled with scrolls and tomes older than the city, many sealed in glass. At the center, on a pedestal, lay a fragment of the artifact, a crystalline orb that glimmered with the memory of centuries. "This is the first piece," Cale said, his voice low, like wind rustling through dry leaves. "It must be taken carefully. It is guarded by a spirit, one tied to your bloodline." Elara's pulse quickened. "A spirit?" "What do you mean?" Dorian stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers lightly. "The curse was created long ago, when your ancestors made a choice that bound our fates. This spirit is the guardian, a reminder of what was lost and what must be protected. It will test you, and it will try to drive you away. Elara swallowed hard. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but beneath it, determination flared. She had already crossed thresholds she did not understand. She could not, would not, turn back now. Kale nodded toward the orb. Step forward. The spirit will know you, but it must also see your courage. Stand your ground. Elara took a deep breath and approached the pedestal. The moment her fingers brushed the orb, a chill swept through the chamber, and a shadow rose before her. It was a figure shrouded in darkness, its form twisting and flickering, its eyes glowing with the same crimson light as Kale's. "Who dares disturb my watch?" it whispered, a voice both melodic and terrifying, echoing off the walls. Elara's heart pounded. She looked at Kale and Dorian, but they only watched, waiting for her to act. She stepped forward, holding her ground. "I am Elara," she said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "I come not to steal, but to understand. I come to heal what has been broken." The spirit shifted, its form coiling around her like smoke. "You are the key," it said. "But keys must be proven worthy. Only courage will grant you passage." Kael's eyes glimmered. "Remember what I told you. Fear is natural, but courage is acting despite it." Elara nodded, focusing on the warmth she felt from the orb in her satchel. She reached out again, and the shadow flared, testing her resolve with visions of failure, of the castle burning, of the kings defeated. Fear lanced through her, but she stood tall, repeating Dorian's words in her mind. "I will not turn away," she said firmly. The shadow paused, and for a moment the chamber fell silent. Then it bowed slightly, dissolving into the air, leaving the orb gleaming softly on a pedestal. Elara lifted it carefully, feeling its pulse align with her own heartbeat. She had passed the first test. Dorian stepped closer, his eyes reflecting pride and something deeper. "You did well," he said softly. "You are stronger than you realize." Kale, however, remained distant, his gaze sharp and calculating. "Do not let pride blind you. This is only the beginning. Each piece will demand more, and each piece will challenge your heart as well as your courage." Elara nodded, sensing the weight behind his words. She felt it already. The pull of power, the pull of choice, the pull of two men who carried centuries of longing and danger in their gaze. They journeyed next through a forest cloaked in perpetual twilight, a place where mist clung to the ground like water, and the trees whispered secrets of the past. The path twisted and turned, and every step seemed to pull her deeper into the magic that surrounded the kings. "The second piece lies within the ruins of a city long forgotten," Kale said. "It is protected not by a spirit but by the remnants of anger and betrayal. You must be prepared to face not only it, but the echoes of history."
Elara's stomach tightened.
Every fragment seemed to demand more than courage. It demanded understanding, empathy, and resolve. She realized with a flutter of both fear and longing that the artifact pieces were tied not only to the curse, but to the hearts of the two kings themselves. They arrived at the ruins just as the sun dipped below the horizon. Broken towers and collapsed archways rose from the earth like jagged teeth. Shadows pooled in every corner, and the air was thick with the weight of old regrets. "There," Dorian said softly, pointing to a pedestal cracked with age. A faint glow radiated from the fragment nestled atop it. Elara stepped forward, but before she could reach it, the ruins trembled. Shadows moved among the stones, whispering in voices she could not fully hear. And then a figure emerged. A phantom of the past, its eyes hollow, its presence radiating centuries of grief. You cannot take this," it hissed, voice echoing in the empty streets. "It is mine. It belongs to those who suffered, to those who were betrayed." Elara's heart pounded. She could feel the echoes of pain, the weight of betrayal carried by the centuries. "I do not seek to steal," she said softly. "I seek to heal, to end the cycle of suffering." The phantom hesitated, studying her. Kale and Dorian watched silently, letting her face the test alone. She stepped closer, reaching for the fragment. The shadows of the phantom lashed at her, visions of loss and fear flashing before her eyes. But she held her ground, her resolve hardening. "I will not falter," she said. And with that, the phantom's form dissolved, leaving the fragment free for her to take. Dorian stepped forward immediately, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are doing more than surviving, Alara. You are changing the past by facing it." Cale's eyes remained watchful, his presence a constant reminder of the fine line between control and freedom. "Do not forget," he said, "the curse is patient, but it is relentless, and so are those who wish to see it continue." They returned to the castle under the veil of night, each step filled with unspoken tension. Alara carried the fragments carefully, her mind alive with questions and emotions she could not yet name. The king's rivalry, subtle yet undeniable, pressed against her heart in ways that made her pulse quicken. She felt torn between the warmth of Dorian's guidance and the intensity of Cale's presence, both equally compelling and equally dangerous. Days passed in a blur of training, study, and preparation. Alara learned to attune herself to the artifact's power, to feel its pulse and anticipate its needs. The castle itself seemed to respond to her growing strength, shadows bending and light shifting as if acknowledging her presence. Cale's lessons were strict, demanding precision and focus. He pushed her to understand not just the artifact but herself, testing her resolve at every turn. Dorian's approach was gentler, teaching her patience, empathy, and the power of choice. Both methods challenged her in ways that left her exhausted yet exhilarated. One night, as the moon rose high above the castle, Alara stood on the balcony, looking out over the mist-shrouded forest. Cale approached silently, his gaze fixed on her. "You are changing," he said, voice low. "Stronger, wiser, more aware of what lies ahead." Alara met his gaze, heart beating faster. "I am trying," she admitted.
"I do not know if it is enough."
Cale's expression softened just slightly.
"It is enough because you will not give up."
"You never will. And that is why you are the key." Before she could respond, Dorian appeared, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Alara," he said softly, "there is something you must know. The artifact, it tests not only courage, but heart. And hearts can be fractured. Yours, mine, Cale's, all are tied together in ways you cannot yet understand." Alara's pulse quickened, awareness of the complex bonds between them tightening in her chest. She had begun to realize that this journey was not only about breaking the curse, but about navigating the intricate web of desire, trust, and choice. Suddenly, a shadow flickered across the balcony. Alara's heart leapt. She reached instinctively for the fragments, and Cale and Dorian tensed. The air seemed to thrum with danger, and the castle itself seemed to hold its breath. "It's coming," Cale said, his voice tight. "The final test, the one that will determine whether the curse is broken or unleashed." Alara's chest ached with fear and anticipation. She did not know what awaited her, only that it would demand everything she had learned, and more. Dorian stepped closer, his hand brushing hers lightly. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "you are not alone. We face it together." Alara nodded, feeling a mixture of fear, longing, and determination. She was no longer just a scholar. She was a part of something larger, something dangerous, something beautiful. And though she did not know what the next step would bring, she was ready to face it. The castle trembled softly, shadows swirling like living things. The artifact fragments pulsed in her satchel, calling her forward. And in the quiet of the night, a whisper floated through the halls. "The heart is tested, and only the brave endure." Alara's fingers tightened around the fragments, her pulse echoing the artifact's rhythm. She knew the path ahead would fracture hearts, test loyalties, and demand sacrifices. But she also knew that she had crossed the threshold, and there was no turning back. The castle trembled beneath the weight of unseen forces, shadows writhing across the walls like living smoke. Alara stood at the heart of the grand hall, the artifact fragments laid out before her in a careful circle. Cale and Dorian flanked her, their eyes reflecting centuries of longing, pain, and hope. The herald has come, Kale said, his voice tight with authority and concern. It will not allow the curse to be broken without a fight. And this time the battle is not just for power. It is for the very heart of our world. Elara's fingers trembled as she touched the central fragment, feeling its pulse echo in her chest. She had grown in courage and strength over the past days, but fear still whispered in her mind. Every lesson, every test, every fragment she had claimed had led to this moment, the culmination of centuries of longing, pain, and sacrifice. "I am ready," she whispered, though the words felt fragile against the weight of destiny pressing on her shoulders. "I will face it, whatever comes." Dorian reached out, brushing his hand lightly against hers. "You are not alone, Elara. You have never been alone. We face this together." Ao's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly, but the intensity in his eyes remained. Then let the trial begin. The shadows in the hall coalesced into a form taller than either king, moving with fluidity and menace. Its eyes glowed with the same crimson light as Kael's, but colder, sharper, and unyielding. It was the herald of the curse, a being born from centuries of betrayal and sorrow, now sent to test her resolve. "I am the witness of your ancestors' failures," it intoned, voice echoing like wind through empty halls. "And I will determine if the cycle ends or continues." Elara took a deep breath, her hand steadying on the fragments. The pulse beneath her fingers felt like a heartbeat, and she realized that the artifact's power was responding not only to her courage, but to her intentions. She was not a pawn. She was the guide, the bridge, the key. "You will not control me," she said firmly. "I am the one who will decide." The herald lunged, shadows twisting into sharp, jagged shapes that lashed at her like whips. Elara's instincts flared. She lifted her hand, and the fragments pulsed with light, forming a protective circle around her. The shadows recoiled, shrieking, but pressed forward again, relentless. Kale stepped beside her, his presence radiating strength. "Do not falter," he commanded. "Let the power flow through you. You are stronger than they realize." Dorian's hand touched hers again, gentle, grounding. "Focus, Elara. Your heart is the key. Do not let fear rule it." Elara closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of the artifact synchronize with her heartbeat. She imagined the library, the castle, the fragments she had fought to claim, and the two kings who had trusted her. She felt their centuries of longing, their suffering, and their hope, and a determination unlike anything she had ever known surged through her. The shadows attacked again, faster, sharper, but this time Elara did not retreat. She raised her hand, letting the fragments glow brighter, illuminating the hall with a pure, golden light. The shadows hissed, twisting in fury, but they began to falter, unable to penetrate the strength of her resolve. "You are more than a scholar," Kale said, voice low and fierce. "You are the heart of this story, Elara. Do not doubt it." Dorian nodded, eye shining. "And love does not weaken you. It strengthens you. Let it guide you." Elara opened her eyes, the light from the fragments spilling across her face. She felt the courage of her ancestors, the wisdom of the library, and the power of the king's centuries of longing surge within her. The shadow screamed and lunged one last time, and with a cry that was both defiance and hope, she brought the fragments together. A wave of light exploded outward, engulfing the hall. The herald screamed, its form twisting and fracturing, then finally dissolving into nothingness. The shadows lifted, retreating into the corners of the castle, leaving the hall bathed in golden dawn. Elara sank to her knees, chest heaving, the fragments glowing softly around her. She had done it. She had faced the curse, faced the herald, and emerged unbroken. Kale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You have done what no one else could. You have broken the cycle. The curse is gone." Dorian stepped closer, his eyes bright with relief and admiration. "The world is different now because of you, Elara. You have given us hope, and perhaps even a chance at peace." Elara looked between them, her heart heavy with emotion. She had feared the responsibility, feared the weight of centuries. But now, standing in the aftermath, she understood the truth. She had not only broken the curse, she had grown, transformed, and discovered a strength within herself she had never known. "You both," she began, voice trembling. "You trusted me, even when I was afraid, even when I didn't know what to do." Kale's gaze softened, the intensity giving way to something warmer, almost reverent. "We had no choice but to trust you," he said quietly. "You were always the key." Always. Dorian's hand found hers, light and steady. "And we would not have survived this without you. Not just because of your strength, but because of your heart." A silence settled over the hall, filled with the weight of unspoken words, centuries of longing, and the delicate thread of something new blossoming between them. Elara felt her pulse quicken, her chest aching with a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something deeper, something she had felt building from the first moment she met them. The castle seemed to breathe around them, the walls no longer oppressive but alive with quiet celebration. Light spilled through the windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars. "You have changed everything," Elara whispered, almost to herself. "Not just the curse, but me." Kale's hand brushed hers lightly, deliberate and careful. "And in changing you, you have changed us. Our centuries of longing, our pain, have found an answer in you." Dorian stepped closer, placing his hand over hers atop the fragments. "And the heart you have shown, it will guide us forward, together." Alara's eyes flicked between them, emotions colliding, fear, hope, longing, and an ache she could not fully name. She realized with startling clarity that she had grown to care deeply for both of them, and they for her in ways that spanned centuries and defied reason. The morning sun touched the spires of the castle, and for the first time, Elara felt lightness in her chest. The curse that had haunted the kings and their domain was gone, and the shadows that had followed her journey now bowed quietly in reverence. But there was also a sense of something lingering, a truth that even victory could not erase. The bonds they shared were complicated, fragile, and yet unbreakable. They had faced centuries of darkness, and now they had a chance to shape their own future, together or apart. Kale's crimson eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "The choice is yours, Elara," he said softly. "The path forward is yours to decide." Dorian's golden gaze held the same weight, gentle but insistent. "Whatever you choose, we will follow. But your heart will guide us, and we trust it." Elara took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the fragments against her hands, the lingering pulse of magic in her veins, and the presence of two beings who had lived centuries but now stood by her side not as masters, not as kings, but as companions bound by trust, struggle, and something far deeper. I choose," she said, her voice trembling but certain. "I choose to face what comes with both of you. Not as pawns, not as tools, but as hearts that fight together." Kale and Dorian exchanged a glance, centuries of tension and longing reflected in their eyes. Then, slowly, deliberately, they nodded. The castle seemed to sigh, shadows melting into the corners, and light flooded the hall. The artifact fragments pulsed one final time, then dimmed, their purpose fulfilled. Elara felt the weight of destiny lift from her shoulders, replaced by a new fragile hope. For the first time in centuries, the king smiled, not with cunning or ambition, but with relief and trust. And Elara, standing between them, realized that the journey had not only ended the curse but had also begun something new, a chance for redemption, for love, and for hearts to heal across time. Outside, the city began to stir under the dawn. The world was waking, unaware of the night's events, unaware of the battles fought and won in shadowed halls. But inside the castle, three hearts beat together, united by courage, choice, and the knowledge that the story was theirs to shape from this day forward. And in the distance beyond the horizon, the first light of morning touched the spires of the ancient library, a silent promise that though shadows had fallen, the future was bright and full of possibility. Elara exhaled, a smile tugging at her lips. We did it, she whispered, almost to herself. Kale's voice was low but steady, filled with warmth. We faced centuries of darkness and survived. Dorian's hand covered hers, the gesture gentle, grounding, and eternal. And now we face the dawn, together. For the first time, Elara felt the truth of their words. The curse was broken. The shadows had been overcome, and the story, her story, their story, was only beginning. The library, the castle, the artifact, the kings, they were no longer the center of fear or longing. They were the center of hope, of love, and of a future that could finally be shaped by choice, courage, and heart. And with that realization, Elara, Kale, and Dorian stepped forward into the light of a new dawn, ready to write the next chapter of their lives, together.